Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Prep Talk podcast hosted by myself. And tonight we have Nick Spizak on the pod for our weekly edition of Nights with Nick. Tonight we are going to be going over something I see a lot of folks struggling with, which is establishing their priorities. We're going to walk through kind of what an Amazon seller that's beginning should, set as their priorities, and then talk about our experience and what we see not only in, the Amazon space, but then also on the corporate side as well a little bit. But Nick, thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, happy to do this again. Make this a repeat thing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy the opportunity to glean a little bit from what we see in the Amazon space, where you have a lot of younger folks that are learning, and like with our corporate experience, we kind of can see where there are opportunities, and then help them learn tools that allow them kind of to improve. But wanted to kind of start off with the inspiration for this episode. You tweeted out, I think it was last week, about the Eisenhower matrix. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is and how you leverage that?
Yeah, sure. So the Eisenhower matrix, there's a lot of different frameworks that you can do for task prioritization. So I think before we even get into the framework, find something that works for you. And each person, that's going to be a little bit different. So essentially how the Eisenhower matrix works is, and there's plenty of pictures of it that kind of show it. So for you'll have one quadrant that's going to be set up for your do column. And essentially what that is you're going to organize across your horizontal axis a sense of urgency. So is it urgent? Is it not urgent? And then down your vertical, you're going to have, is it important? And is it not important? So if it's in your section where it's both urgent and it's important, then you're going to do that. You're personally going to do it. It needs to get done. It's important. And there's a timeline that's associated with it. So maybe that, from a practicality perspective, you get a call from one of the boys and there's a bolo, there's something that you need to buy and it's going to sell out. So you're getting on the Zoom call, you're buying it, and you need to do it before it sells out. So that's an example of something that you would have that's urgent, important, and you're going to do it. Now, there's also going to be the items where it's important, but it's not necessarily urgent. So you're going to schedule those activities, right? Those are things that they're strategic. Maybe there's a new type of skill you want to learn. Maybe there's a book you want to read that's going to take you to the next level in your business. That's something that is clearly important because it's going to level you up as an entrepreneur, but it doesn't have to be done right this second. So think of it in that lens. That can be a lot of different things. Apply that to your individual situation. Now, in the bottom half, you have things that are urgent, but they might not actually be important. And we talked about in episode 1 around being able to leverage your remote team. These are items where you would delegate that. So you might have things with shipments, right? You want to put out an Amazon shipment. That's urgent because you already made a spend. You have money committed to that, and you want to get that turned through in your inventory. So that's something that has urgency, but it's not as important. So you could delegate that potentially to someone in your remote team, put an SOP, a standard operating procedure around how to create your shipments or to respond to customers. So those are just some different examples of that category. And the last one is it's not urgent and it's not important. And those we just delete. Get them out of your brain. They're taking up valuable cycles and headspace that you really don't want to be doing. So those are distractions.
100%. I think that the best work is the work you don't do, like the stuff that you just delete, like, because then it's just out of your headspace. I think that people will put a lot of pressure on themselves to do everything, and that's not practical, and you're going to burn out. So I see that a lot in like the corporate side because um, everybody's hot topic is important. But when you're operating in a business of scale, not everything is important. If it impacts one person, not very important. If it impacts a lot of people and it's a key feature or whatever the case it is, that's more important. So learning to say no is probably one of your best skills that you will develop. and then just putting in the delete column, and then you'll actually move the needle on things that, you know, add value to your business or move the needle in whatever endeavor you're looking to go down. But those are just my thoughts on, and kind of tying that into a little bit of the corporate side that we, you know, work in. Um, but what would you say are the, like, if you're starting Amazon, what would you say are the, like, most important things when you're starting? Like, what should you prioritize and what should you defer a little bit and eventually address in the long run? Like, what isn't urgent? What is?
Yeah, so urgent and important sourcing, right? Do that. Prioritize that. You'll hear, like Pete, you and I will talk a lot about athletic analogies and things like
Yep.
that because we're ingrained in us. So if I use an analogy of baseball, that's hitting off the tee. If that's hoops, right? That's being able to spend the time on the foul, on shooting free throws. Like whatever it is, those are fundamental skills that are core to your business. So if you're an Amazon reseller, sourcing is core to your business. So starting out, put that in your urgent and important column. And that's something that starting out is 100% going to be something that you're going to do.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because if you don't know how to source, then your business is going to run dry. Like you're just not. It's not going to be a business if you don't have like profitable products being bought and sold. There's no shot. So we got to start there, and then we have to kind of walk ourselves down into the, you know, not urgent but important, and get good at those. So I think just starting with sourcing will force you to learn everything else. But you really need to start with the sourcing piece and then take care of them as they come. What are things that you would feel like would be not they'd be important but not urgent?
So things that would be important but not urgent. I would say it's interesting because I'm kind of looking back on it now. And so now, today's perspective, I would probably say, okay, do I really need to get my buy sheet updated at the exact second, right? Like those, like, do I need to do that right away? I probably put that as like, okay, something that I would probably more delegate on one of those items. Where something that is important but not urgent might be building the SOPs for my team.
Yeah.
So that as you kind of go through those items, I think that's super key is just to kind of think about where you're at in your journey. Because things that I would prioritize, where how I would evaluate something today would have been totally different from a year ago. Like
Yep.
creating a shipment a year ago would have been in my do column because I never did it before. So
Right.
if you have that, like if you haven't done a shipment before, or more generically, any of those steps, those become the first ones that you do because
Hmm.
how are you going to delegate that or
Right.
schedule it if you don't really know how to do
Right.
it to begin with?
Right.
So
So I think you could make the argument that learning is both like important and relatively urgent if you want to get to a point where there's, you know, a decent income coming in through the Amazon funnel. Um, but yeah, it's funny you mentioned the buy sheet. For me, that was urgent and important because if I didn't do it when I was sitting there, it wasn't getting done. So, because if you just let that stack up, it becomes horrible because you lose all that context and you have to, you know, weed through emails. Um, but so what do you see you know, folks kind of struggling with when it comes to prioritization? Where do you think there are opportunities for folks to get better at it and then, you know, make informed, empowered decisions about how they kind of structure their day?
yep. So I would phrase that as like a two-parter, right? So if it's someone that's brand new, and really this isn't generic to brand new, but I think it affects brand new sellers probably more, is the shiny object syndrome. So
Yep.
if you're new and sourcing is your due, bouncing around a lot to different sites. Like each site's going to have its own nuances, its own coupon codes, its own ways that you have to manufacture a margin. And if you're bouncing around a lot like that, you're not going to get good at those items. So I
Yep.
think it's just focusing on one type of strategy, whether that's storefront stalking, just kind of stick with it until you kind of get a grasp of the sites that you like. That would be one. There is the shiny object. And then the one that I would say, as you start to become more of a seasoned seller, and I use that term loosely, right? Everybody's going to be on different stages of their journey for that. But I would say it's probably giving up the control
Yeah.
aspects of things. For me, that was being able to give a virtual member of the team purchasing powers, right? To like that was one of the ones like, whoa, like that, this is a big, but it's such
Right.
an item that it frees up your time. Like you spend a lot of time on purchasing. If you can put the right system around that,
Yep.
I think that helps. And there's many examples where, just being able to relinquish the control of the buy sheet or whatever you may be doing, whether it's purchasing or responding to customers, or some folks really like to do prep. Like any of those items would all follow as examples of that.
Yep.
But I'd be curious though, Pete, tell me a little bit about what you see in terms of areas where sellers are kind of struggling with prioritization.
So, yeah, I mean, I think giving up control, that's a skill. And being comfortable with the fact that if you do outsource an item, it's not going to be maybe to the quality, especially the first turn. But it's so much better than doing it yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that you really see the issues with priority when folks are at inflection points in their business because it's new territory. So, if you're starting your business, you really don't know what to focus on. If you're at you know, if you're thinking about bringing on virtual talent, you may not know how to navigate that. And so then having a mentor is really, really important um, because they can then limit all of that shiny object syndrome. Um, I think generally though, a lot of people run around kind of with their like chickens with their head cut off, just trying to go from thing to thing and get everything done at once. And that can be something you do in a short sprint, but you'll actually be more effective if you slow down and you give yourself structure. Um, I think on like the corporate side, I just use this example, but when I send an email and I get a response within like 5 minutes to that email, I have questions. Like, like that is bizarre because I think that it reflects a little bit of underlying insecurity and this need to demonstrate that you can do all things when in reality you are not able to do all things. So like I batch my emails. So I'll dedicate an hour a day. It's on my calendar where I will review emails because anything that I'm getting an email about is not that important at the end of the day. Um, so I think I mean, that's a long-winded thing that I see. And then, I mean, generally, kind of going off that email example, I think everybody's super distracted. So um, I just implemented this recently, but like turning off all the notifications.
Yeah.
If you're getting the notifications from Twitter and Instagram, you're doing something wrong. That's not good. Because I really don't care when the one person likes the post. Like, I appreciate them doing it, but I don't need to be alerted to
Yeah.
it. Like I love that they're showing love, but it's like if I saw 50 likes on something, I'm gonna go crazy. Uh, so I think that those are like some tips. Is just like turn off all the notifications and uh, communicate that to the important people, right? Hey, I'm not going to be as responsive as kind of is what is expected in today's world. Um, Here are the if something's really important, if there's an emergency or whatever, here's how you get to me, and I will pick up. Like I will be there. But I see that as some themes and some opportunities for some folks for sure. So, Nick, I know that you are really well versed, not only from your corporate experience in managing really complex like software solutions, but then also you understand some of the newer technology that's out there. Do you want to speak a little bit um, to like how you view work management, and then maybe touch on some of the tools that you leverage to manage that work?
Yep. Yeah. So with work management, I think one important thing that I would recommend in this space from corporate life and then bringing that into entrepreneurial life is keep it simple at the beginning, right? I think it's very easy to spend a lot of cycles on doing research on all the different types of available technologies that are out
Yep.
there. And to this day, like I put this out on Twitter probably too much at this point, but the 4x6 note cards, like they just work, right? So if a sheet of paper or whatever you have available is getting the job done, then that's effective. Like start there. Now, as you start to get more tasks that are on there and things there are ways that you can make things more efficient. But a 4x6, a piece of paper, whatever your mechanism, that's effective, right? It's going to get the job done. If you want something that's more efficiency, then that's when you start looking into different tools or software options that are available. Now, in task management space, you can use something like a Trello board. We use those a lot in software development, where you're essentially moving a task through different stages. And there's different methodologies that you can use for these items. In software, you'll hear terms like Agile, which is a methodology, versus Kanban, which Kanban starts to get into lean and things like that. So at the end of the day, it's a way to manage the flow of work. And you can use something like Trello to help you with that, but it doesn't have to be that something sophisticated. We used at work for a long time, and we still use it in other items, a whiteboard with basic stickies.
Yep.
Literally just move the stickies from one column to the next, and it gets the job done.
Yep. And for the audience, like these boards, basically they have columns that represent statuses of work. And so you would have an example of like thinking about it or like refining the piece of work. You would then so you're gathering the details that you need to then execute it. And then you would move it to like, say, doing. I'm actually executing the task, and then I'm done with the task. So it just shows that life cycle of a task. And I think that these boards are a lot more useful, in particular when you have a team, and communicating around that and visualizing the status just by a quick glance. It can be powerful when you have a team. We recently implemented that. And right now, we're working through a lot of like user permissions and things that are going to disrupt that task. It's going to block it. It's going to prevent our team from moving forward. So if I can just go in for 5 minutes in the morning and say, okay, she's blocked here, blocked here, blocked here, then I can go take then 15 minutes and go address those problems. Having that time slotted for that effort, knowing it's going to happen. But really, yeah, we're just using this to communicate a little bit more effectively. And I think that you probably can think more about it when you have that team in place. I think the 4x6 works. If you're starting, a list works. A short list works.
Especially for yourself. And I think you hit on something, right? So as you're scaling your own personal team, right? What type of areas would you see that you find relevant in corporate world that you'll use within your business for as your team continues to expand as well?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. There's tons of lessons to be learned. Like when you're starting, you're not at scale. Say you're working that corporate job, they are at scale. They understand all of the problems, all of the breakdowns in communications. And so they put in systems. So what are we going to do? We're going to copy them, and we're going to, maybe tweak them a little bit to our liking. And then we're going to be more efficient, and we didn't have to spend a lot of time looking for a solution. We don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. So what are like some of the cool tools that you see that would allow folks to, maybe delegate or take some of those important but not urgent tasks and put them onto a team? Like, what are you seeing? I know you're tapped into the new
Yeah.
tech.
So delegate can also be, this isn't on the official framework, but think of it in the same lens, right? Delegate can also be automate, right? So
Yes.
that's an aspect of that where once you know it, you optimize to where you want, then it's either automate it or delegate it if it's something that can't be automated. So that's where some of the tools can be super effective in that space. So Corey's talked about this a lot, like Scribe How. So taking a procedure that you've done, right? It was in your do column that you're getting ready to delegate. You go through and you use that as one of your mechanisms to essentially go through the process of however you're doing a shipment or you're responding to a customer. And then that turns into documentation that you can provide to your remote team. Now, where do you store that documentation? For some folks, it might just be as simple as a Word doc that you have in Google Drive. If you want to get a little bit more crazy with it, right, you could use something like Notion templates. So Notion's completely free. It'll give you an option where you can create, essentially, it uses a lot of different things. It can be databases if you want, but it's a great place to store anything related to how-to guides and SOPs. And the beauty of that is it integrates with other tools really well. And it does it seamlessly in the sense that you don't need to be technical to use these tools. Connect it with super.so, right? Which gives you the ability to have it as a website, like a read-only website of that. So if you have a procedure that you want to share with your team, you could share the Notion template with them. Or if it's something where you potentially want to have it locked down, you could put some permissions around it and expose it as a read-only copy. So those are just two examples of ways to use technology to do the optimization of your SOPs and then present them through Notion as a way to kind of store everything.
Yeah, and I really like the point about automation, and I think that uh, there are tasks that are going to come up that uh, we should do them once and automate them through, maybe a tool within an application that we're using. We're sending a payment or whatever the case may be. If there's a cadence to it, like I think that it's underappreciated how much time, if you're manually going and doing something that you could automate, like how much that like that 10-minute task probably takes 20 minutes of capacity. And if
Mhm.
you have 10 of those, you're going to get very little important things done when I could use a computer to do it for me.
Yeah.
And then it's
Yeah.
out of sight, out of mind. So, um, yeah, I think don't let those things stack up. Like if you have bills you have to pay, automate them so you never have to do it again because you're paying the bill whether you're clicking the button or not. So, little things.
That's
Um,
spot on. And I
yeah,
think a lot of times we always hear the word, like the buzzy word, well, just go automate it, right? But what's that actually mean? So to
yeah,
give some practical for the audience, right? You could utilize tools like Zapier or Make.com. Both of them are no code options. They allow you to stitch the combination of tasks together. So if you have something that you've put into an SOP, a standard operating procedure in Notion, and maybe it's a flow chart or something like that, and you know that these are the 5 things that I do on a regular basis, and it's something that could be done by, for lack of a better term, a robot, right? Those are good tools that you could take a look at that require very little technical skill outside of understanding how your process flow works. So that's something to kind of think about too. Like, if do I need remote talent to do it, or is it something that I can have a robot essentially be able to handle for me?
right. And then, I mean, the non-technical automation is a pretty cool step, at least I mean from my perspective, because I'm not extremely technical. Um, but also be thinking about, the maintenance that you may have to do with your tasks. Every time, and this is just, a very broad statement, but every time you create something, you then will have a backlog of, technical maintenance that you will have to eventually do. So just keep that in mind. Um, so there's trade-offs, and things change. It might disrupt those processes, but just accept the fact that you are inheriting that if you do these options. Um, Probably would still be worth it, to be honest. But
Yeah, that's a really good call out. Looking at it from a total cost of ownership perspective, not just the dev work took 2 hours. It's okay, is the development work to automate that, when you think of the maintenance items, is that going to result in additional overhead that would have just been cheaper to have someone on your team go through and do on a regular basis?
right,
So,
right,
yeah.
and then you kind of get into um, something that you probably should be doing with your team is like having regular check-ins and having an agenda for those sessions. Because if you don't have a few points that you want to hit on, it's probably not an effective use of time. It's something that I push on a lot on the corporate side is, you know, people fall into the trap of feeling that movement is equal to output, and it's not. Like if you don't have intent behind what you're doing, you should question that and then create like templates and formats to really squeeze the value out of everything you're doing. I've on the corporate side, like I've had conversations with some of the developers that I work with, and I was like, "Are you getting value from this meeting?" And they go, "No," and I said, "Okay, then don't go." Like if you're not walking away with value, you're wasting time. You could be you could be leveraging a strength. You could be learning something that'll help the team down the road. So don't go. I can give you the cliff notes. if it's that important to the firm or to your business, whatever it is. So, um, again, saying no is very, very powerful, and you have to be doing these audits of what is actually moving the needle for you.
What was there's a term that they use. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Stop starting. That's one of them. Stop starting, start finishing. There's some, I probably said it wrong, but it made me
Okay.
think of that's one that's right in line to what you just said, where it's because you're limiting your work in progress for things. And if it's something that's
Hmm.
not, if it's wasteful, it's a meeting that doesn't make sense to go to, it's a conversation you don't need to have at that point in time, then you're not driving toward the outcome that you want. So it makes total
Yeah.
sense.
100%. Well, and I think that people like don't even recognize that they're not getting value. They're just like accustomed to their routine.
Yeah.
And so, uh, every once in a while, I was reading Buyer Time Back recently, and they were like, go do an audit of everything you do and record like the things that you're doing on a 15-minute basis. And you're going to create a spreadsheet. And then you're going to go put a dollar sign next to the tasks that you were doing. Did they put money in your bank account? Did they grow your business? If they didn't, then we kind of get into the Eisenhower matrix of this is how we then gauge what we should be doing and what we should be delegating. So if we do that, we could probably course correct pretty quickly, but we have to be honest with ourselves so that we can navigate into higher leverage opportunities.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, Pete,
So
I think that pretty much gives a good wrap for what we wanted to cover today. I'd be curious for the audience as we continue to do these each week. What are some other topics that you're thinking about for us to cover? So there's different items that Pete and I have come across in our day jobs that probably have some relevance there. So I'd be curious to hear for anyone that's watching or listening in different topics that you'd like to hear about. So
100%. Well, and if you've gotten this far, we appreciate you listening. And like Nick said, drop a comment with something you'd like our perspective on, and we'll catch you next time.
that's good.